Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. There are those who have escaped killers at the last moment. What's their story? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. My college buddy and I had just completed a big project and went out for late-night milkshakes to celebrate. On the way back, he stopped for gas near campus. 3 kids, maybe 13, 15, or 16, and 17 or 18, are there with a gas can asking for a ride back to their car. For some unknown reason, my friend, who was normally pretty curmudgeonly, offered them a ride. We go several blocks to a sketchy part of town when they tell us to pull over behind a car parked along the side of the road. As soon as we do, the youngest kid opens the back passenger door and books it. The middle kid starts splashing gasoline on us, and the oldest gets out via the back driver's side door and leans into the front, trying to grab the keys and demanding our wallets or they'll set us on fire. I go for the eyes of the guy leaning in. He pulls back and we skedaddle out my side, soaked in gasoline. The middle kid comes after me and I just push him, and we start running. I lose my flip-flops and am running barefoot. We jump a fence and find a bougainvillea bush on the other side and finally make it back to the gas station and call the cops. Within 1 minute, we have what I later learn is every patrol car in town pull up. They take us back to find the car, which is abandoned with gasoline pooling on the floorboards. We have it towed and go back to file a report and look through mugshots. The police question us for what seems like a long time, and finally, as we're leaving, one of them apologizes for the 3rd degree and tells us that based on the location, they initially thought it might be a drug deal gone bad. Finally get back home, throw away my clothes, and as I'm showering and trying to get the gasoline smell off of me, notice blood running down the drain, discovering in my hasty barefoot retreat that I'd stepped on a dime-sized piece of glass that was still embedded in my foot. Not a great night, although it has gotten me out of jury duty a couple of times. I was walking home from a late shift and heard this commotion behind a few stores. As I got closer, I noticed that it was a guy literally stabbing the shit out of another guy. He turned around to see me and came running toward me. I knew of a side alley for service near my work, and I cut down there and circled back round to find the man had been brutally stabbed but not fatally. I called the emergency services, and the man lived. The CCTV of that night was able to help police identify him, and he's currently in prison on 2 counts of murder and 1 attempted. So yeah, that was close. I worked with a serial killer and didn't know it. We became friends and started hanging out for about a year. He would come over to our house and drink and party and play football. At the time, I was selling weed that he bought from me, until one night he pulled a gun on my wife, and I took all my weed, my money. We did not put up a fight, and my wife was talking shit to him the whole time. I'm pretty sure he didn't kill us because he had respect for my wife, because she had a job and worked hard for her money. He only stole money from me, and did not go through my wife's purse, which ironically had more cash in it than he got from me. About a month later, we were watching the news, and bam, there he was, wanted for killing Mexican prostitutes. He was known to us as RP. His full name was Richard Paul White, and he is rotting in prison to this day. My neighbor growing up was a psycho. He constantly discussed violence and acted out scenarios of shooting people with guns. There were many kids in the neighborhood, and we all sort of hung out together despite not really liking each other that much. Better than alone, right? Anyway, a group of us was at Psycho Kid's house one afternoon. His parents had a garage full of tools that we were somehow allowed to just walk around in. It was full of sharp, rusty crap everywhere. In the middle of a game of tag, I accidentally stepped on and broke a stick that was lying in the yard. Psycho freaks out, like beet red face rage, screaming, "You broke my stick!" I apologized and said I didn't know it was the one he had been playing, aka pantomiming a mass shooting with. He ran into the garage and came out with a sickle, which is typically used for cutting tall grass. He charged at me and pinned me to the outer wall of the house, managing to bring the blade up to my neck. I was struggling with him as hard as I could, gripping his arms and trying to keep the blade from reaching me. The moment his mom stuck her head out the back door 4 feet away from us and scolded me for playing too rough with her son, it literally saved my life. It was the worst parenting I've ever experienced. Nevertheless, it provided a brief distraction, allowing me the opportunity to strike him in the stomach and make my escape. I cleared the fence between our houses in seconds. No doubt he's in prison somewhere now, if we're all lucky, and his parents are wondering how their sweet angel ended up that way. That's the type of parent that drives me crazy. The ones that think that their child is infallible and free of any wrongdoing, or they could never possibly do anything wrong, and they're always right. Mostly because they look at their child as a reflection of them, and it's probably their own ego not allowing them to be seen as vulnerable or wrong. It's pretty gross. Anyway, enjoy your Sunday. Mine is not super exciting, but I was an idiot traveling the world. I was in a small village in Honduras walking around with a laptop in a bag. I had a general sense of not feeling welcome in the village. Many people are whispering and staring. A group of guys got out of a truck and I saw one of them had a machete. They started following us through town, but acting like they were minding their own business. My buddy and I, barely having to even talk to each other, decided to turn a corner and book it. They chased us for about 2 blocks and gave up. We got back to the ship and the captain ordered a recall. Everyone lost their liberty for it, but I think it was the right call. I briefly dated a guy in high school. He was kind of off in a really quiet, super sensitive kind of way. I knew he had a personality disorder. Even after we broke up, I'd give him rides and stuff. He never really went out and met people, but he was really nice and a very gentle person. I picked him up one day, and he was really agitated and was telling me how the court gave him a new doctor and they stopped his one med and gave him new ones he had never had before, and he didn't like it. I dropped him off at his grandma's, and that weekend he had a psychotic episode and disemboweled his grandmother. I didn't know until I saw it on the news a week later. I'm absolutely positive it was the sudden change of meds, and his whole family was shocked and heartbroken. When I was 11, a sitter took a bunch of us to a public pool. Around 4-ish, the sun moved and it was getting cooler, so everyone headed out. I was the last in our group to enter the pool. I wasn't particularly adept at swimming. I noticed 2 teen boys pointing at me. They suddenly dove into the water. One grabbed my long hair and pulled me to the bottom while the other tore my bathing suit bottoms off. I didn't know what was going on at the time, but now as an adult, I assumed they were going to arm me. I fought like the devil, and they eventually surfaced for air. I did too, and they jumped off out of the pool and took off. I regained my strength and got out of the pool and found a lifeguard who I think must have seen something. Anyway, the lifeguard told me if I couldn't get along with people to leave the pool. My stepfather went to the pool when he got off work to have words with the lifeguard. Hitchhiking back in the day, a guy in a big shiny Cadillac gave me a ride. He then proceeded to tell me about 2 young boys the night before. Told him to let me out right here, and he kept going. He pulled off onto a gravel road and drove it down it before coming to a halt. He started to reach under his seat as soon as the car stopped. I spun around and kicked his head, bouncing it off the window as he got out, and ran like hell back to the highway and immediately got another ride. I have absolutely no idea if I hurt him badly or not, and I never lost a single night's sleep over it. I was 5 years old when this happened. My parents had just separated, and my mother decided to attend a girls' night out. She commissioned my 16-year-old male cousin to babysit my siblings and me. After my cousin put my siblings and me to bed, he invited some friends over to hang out. One of his friends was completely up on acid. Said friend went into the kitchen, grabbed a butcher knife from the block on the counter, and walked toward my bedroom. My brother, who was 7, happened to be watching this guy from his own bedroom. As soon as he saw him walking toward my bedroom, my brother jumped up from bed, ran into my room, grabbed my arm and pulled me off the bed, just before acid guy began repeatedly stabbing the mattress. I don't recall what happened next that night. I only remember looking at my shredded mattress the next morning, and then watching my mother talking to some people at the front door. I would later learn that once I was dragged off my bed, my brother began screaming, which brought my cousin and his other friends running. Upon seeing the carnage, they all wrestled Acid Guy into submission, called the cops, and had him hauled away. The people at the door the next morning were the Acid Guy's parents. They offered to pay off my mother in exchange for her dropping the charges against their son. Mom agreed. I got a new mattress, and my mom bought a nice above-ground swimming pool with the leftover money. The Acid Guy would go on to finish college, get married, have several children, and now own a successful car dealership. He's not exactly a killer, but only because of the quick thinking of my 7-year-old brother. When I was 10 years old or so, my family took a trip up the west coast of the United States. We always made a stop at a familiar thrift store whenever we visited the area. My mom and dad usually didn't mind me going off in stores as long as I stayed a few aisles away. At some point in the store, I started to realize a man was following me around. I didn't think much of it, but kept my guard up just in case. Was taught stranger danger early on. I got to the toy section and was playing with a few random toys when the man started asking me questions randomly. You have pretty hair. Do you brush it yourself? You like to play with toys? Which ones do you prefer? What's your favorite color? At this point, I'm getting scared because he was closing the gap between us, and I was stuck down an aisle that only had one way out. He began coming closer to me, a creepy look on his face as he tried to reach out to touch me. I screamed bloody murder. Everyone in the store ran over to see what was going on. The man freaked out, grabbed me, and tried to run. I'm screaming for my parents, who came running a few seconds later, and my dad punched the guy, grabbed me when the guy let go of me when he was punched, and we went to the front of the store to call the police, back when cell phones didn't exist. Police arrived, and my parents told them what happened, but I guess the guy bolted out the back door because he was gone. I don't remember all the details of how he escaped. A few years later, I was watching the news and saw a familiar face, and my mom started freaking out and told me and my dad that the guy on the TV, he was booked for kidnapping, awing, and murdering young children. It was the guy who tried to take me. My boyfriend's father had a close encounter with the Belgian serial killer Freddy Horian. First off, he went to the same school as Horian, but was a couple of years younger. Then, when Horian was in the middle of his murder spree, boyfriend's father applied for a job. Since he had a car and another applicant didn't, he agreed to give the other person a ride home. They didn't drive off just yet, but were still discussing the exam, when all of a sudden, boyfriend's father noticed someone running off in a frenzy. He recognized him as his old schoolmate, Freddy Horian. The following day, they heard that a murder had been committed right where they were parked, so he told police what he knew. They apprehended Horian, and boyfriend's father had to identify him down at the police station. For some reason, the police guided both boyfriend's father and Horian to the door at the same time. This was the 70s. So Horian said to him, "I know who you are. When I get out, I'm going to kill you." But he was sentenced to life and is still in prison to this day. When I was young, around 6 or 7, early 90s, I was shopping with my grandparents. They bought me a slice of pizza and said I could go out to the car and eat it while they paid and loaded the cart. So I was sitting in the car eating a slice in my glory, and I could see this man kept waving at me and making funny faces and smiling and motioning for me to come over to his car. I remember being really scared, but I also knew my grandparents would be by any moment. He got out of his car and came over, and I locked the door. He tried the handle a few times, then he eventually left and got back to his car. As he did, my grandparent came out, and I told them what happened. Now this is the best part of the story. My grandfather, God rest his soul, was someone not to be with. He had a reputation around town, and let me tell you, when he told my grandmother to cover my eyes, it was for good reason. He reached in, grabbed this guy, pulled him out of his car, and beat him down right there in the parking lot. A few people that were around had come over and said that they'd seen this guy frequent the shopping center, and he was a super creepy guy. always talking to kids and stuff. Grandfather also said he had a bunch of candy and stuff in the back seat. I wouldn't say they were necessarily a killer, but more along the lines of a human trafficker or someone whose intentions were to cause harm to me. About 7 months ago, I drove from New York to Florida. I did this because I needed to be there for my dad earlier than anticipated before the rest of my family was to move down, so I did this alone. I was 19 and had never driven further than a 3-hour distance by myself. I had made my first stop in Maryland along the way to get gas at Wawa. I began to realize how absolutely exhausted I was and decided I needed to call it for the night. So I looked up hotels and realized there was one within the same parking lot as this Wawa. They refused to service me a room because I was not 21. So I walked back to my car and started looking for a place that would take me in. I got lost in the midst of my unbearable anxiety while looking for places, and I was unaware of how far away I was actually parked from the rest of the other cars, not accounting for anything that could possibly happen. Out of my peripheral vision, I saw a man walking toward my car with a hoodie. He completely just looked sketchy. He walked right up to my window and started asking me to roll it down. I had a seriously bad gut feeling about this and felt awful as it is, and just asked him to go away, politely. He proceeded to try and open my door. I got really startled, and as I put my car into drive, I saw 3 other men step out of a van behind him, parked in an alleyway, and rush toward the car. At this point, this guy was violently shaking my door handle, and as I drove away, he had attempted to walk in front of my car. They chased me all the way toward the intersection, where they eventually gave up. I'm not sure what would have happened if I had forgotten to lock my door while I was parked. I'm even more unsure of what would have happened if I had decided to roll down the window. I ended up crying myself to sleep in a sketchy motel that night, while a movie snowstorm hit Maryland, making my night tremendously worse. An underage individual under the influence of hallucinogens mugged me. They were babbling nonsense at me and flailing a large knife in my face. I turned to run and was stabbed. The knife went through my lung, my diaphragm, and lacerated my liver. Fight or flight kicked in, and I broke away and ran for a bit, but eventually my lung decided not to work anymore, and I just dropped. I sat there, and the attacker just sat next to me, babbling nonsense. I thought for sure they would kill me, and I pretty much gave up at that point. They had dropped the knife back at the location of the incident, thank God. Someone thankfully called the police, and an ambulance was there immediately. I almost died in trauma, but thankfully for transfusions and amazing doctors, I survived. Because my blood pressure was so low, I couldn't be given any painkillers, so they closed up my lung and back with me awake. It was a pain I can't describe. Because my assailant was mentally ill, on drugs, and underage, I had 2 choices. Charge them as an adult, or have them face prison time, or put them through an adolescent rehabilitation program. I don't believe prison does anything but make more prisoners, especially at that age. So I opted for rehab with mandatory probation. I'm happy to report my assailant has been doing much better and has cleaned up their life. They're on the right track, so in a way, I am glad I made my choice. But there are days of anger and PTSD symptoms that make me second guess. I've been in therapy since the incident, and I'm doing much better. I was 18, I took German in college and became pals with the people seated directly around me. The person behind me ended up being my type. Clearly he wanted to hook up. I had some pretty strong body image issues and wasn't a hookup type of person. The connection was there, I just wasn't ready for sex or intimacy. My first red flag should have been when I went to his house the first time. He sat in his work chair at his desk for the PC. He kept pressuring me to sit on his lap. My only other option was to sit on the bed, but being an overthinker, I didn't want to give away for a reason to get on the bed with me. I stood for 2 hours while he showed me videos on his computer. Finally, because he kept asking, I figured I must just be paranoid. I sat on his lap, but as far forward as I could. It wasn't comfortable. It didn't last long. Nothing happened. That night, he was driving me home. He told me he always scrolls in the back of his car. I joked about it. I'm home safe. For the next part, it's important to know my phone had recently broken. I had a spare, but it was only working with Wi-Fi. I couldn't text, call, or use social media. He knew this. We hung out again on October 6th, 2018. He takes me to a big field that hosts things like Cirque du Soleil, etc. There's a soccer field, many parking lots, and lots of space. There was an event that night. I don't know what it was. We parked in the very back of a small pitch-dark lot. This one wasn't being used for the event and wasn't monitored by police. He started putting his hands on my thigh, among other things, which I kept gently rejecting. He gets out to pee. We walk the soccer field. The police are watching the lots across the field. We go back. He locks the doors, and I notice that they're the old-style locks you can't pry open from the passenger side. It's a 2-door car. He gets into the back of the car and keeps saying I should join him. I know where that will go, so I keep saying no. No, I'm comfortable. No, I don't either. No, I like where I am. No, it's too crowded. Any reason I could think of, as he kept asking. Finally, he decides he's asked enough and I'm not budging. Since I'm very petite, he picks me up and pulls me into the back. I'm attempting to establish my personal space, and I fear that if I attempt to sit up and return to the front, he may pull me back into him. I decided my safest option was to sit in the back for a few minutes and say I was getting tired, and if we could, go drop me off. As I move my legs toward the right of my car, I'm lying over him with my back on his legs and my head over the bottom of the seat. He begins to choke me, strangle me. I remember him laughing. I remember not liking how hard he was choking and moving his hands to his hand to pull him off. When I did, he didn't move his hand. He used the free hand to grab my wrists and move them out of the way, and used his strangling hand and arm to hold me down. And I'm kicking my legs, trying to see if I can somehow hit the window or something to break it or make a noise to distract him. It isn't working. I remember being extremely dizzy when he finally stopped. He held out so long. I accepted I was going to die in the back of some random's car, and I stopped struggling. Everything felt slow. He stopped. I sat up. He was smiling this huge smile. I was so pleased. He kept me pinned against the right side of the car in the back for an hour or so, while we continuing to try and make an advance on me. I dodged the best I could. I said no. Finally, I convinced him I was hungry. McDonald's opens soon. Let's go to this specific one. I wanted to show him it, since he wouldn't take me home. This McDonald's was by my old high school. I knew it. I knew the hotel, a lot next to it, the park and ride, the business center, all of it. I knew places I could hide if I got out. I didn't know that McDonald's was in my town, so it was a town over. no big deal. I figured if I was lucky, he'd park close enough to McDonald's so I could get Wi-Fi or maybe use the restroom to dial 911. He parked too far away for Wi-Fi, but he had been using the internet and he was getting tired. He wouldn't take me home. He pulls me into the back again and lays me on the back on top of him. He wouldn't take me home. He pulled me into the back again and lays me on my back on top of him. He's on his back. He's trying to get in my pants and I keep moving away. He shows me his backpack containing items like rope, lube, toys, and rubber gloves. None of those activities were anything I wanted or consented to doing. Thankfully, I had an appointment at 10 a.m. that day with Apple to fix my phone. I recently started driving and wasn't comfortable on my own, so I was having my parents take me. My parents were aware of this. He takes me home around 9, a full 12 hours from when he picked me up, over and over 24 since I'd slept. I don't understand why he suddenly stopped. He wasn't following proper BDSM safety practices, and I clearly wasn't comfortable with it for a while before he stopped. I think he may have thought he killed me or knocked me out. But I thought I got lucky, and I didn't fight until I passed out. I remember the way I wanted to laugh because there I was, about to be murdered in a car, a soccer field's distance away from police. Ironic. Can't say for sure a killer, but I can't imagine it would have ended well. I was about 6 or 7. My parents had made, in hindsight, sage decision to warn me about pedophiles and child predators at a young age. It was the last day of school. I can't remember why, but I ended up staying a lot later than other kids and still had to walk home. It was so late, even the crossing guards, who worked down the road, had left. The walk to my house was about 1.5 miles down a straight road. However, the first half a mile consists of solely backyards and fences on one side of the road and an electrical plant on the other, until you reach the entrance to the first neighborhood, after which homes with front yards begin. I had almost gotten there when I looked to the right and noticed a woman sitting in a minivan directly next to the fence. There was maybe 10 to 20 feet of distance between us. She was wearing sunglasses and had her window rolled up. She gave me the "come here" finger motion, and I almost followed it. My parents had left me with the impression that pedophiles were asylum and always men, but some gut instinct told me to run. Looking back, it was her not calling me over. If she had been a mom, maybe looking for her kid, you'd think she'd call over, "Hey, do you know where such and such is?" Instead, she gave me a sus finger gesture, and her appearance didn't help. I kept walking. What convinces me something awful would have followed is A, although I neglected it at the time, the back windows were spray-painted black, not tinted black. B, as soon as I started to walk away and try to reach the first neighborhood entrance, it wasn't mine, but my game plan at this point was to run to the nearest house with a car in the driveway and bang on the door until someone answered. They started up their minivan and slowly followed me the first 50 feet, driving on the sidewalk, maybe 10 feet or 3 meters behind me. I've never felt fear like that before or since. A young guy walking his dog immediately notices my petrified look as I turn the corner. Van proceeds to take off. The guy walks and me all the way home after I explain why I was so spooked, and my parents take me back to school where I tell our resident deputy everything. Thought it wasn't much, He said he'd follow up with my dog walking pal. The sole silver lining was I forgot my Pokemon index books in my desk and was able to retrieve it, and I cherished that book as a kid.